So, good morning. Thank you so much for coming. I'm not tall enough for this microphone. Anyway, my name is Mina Wong, and I was Cope's mayoral candidate in the 2014 election. I'm here to introduce you to Patrick Condon, the current mayoral candidate. When I was running as mayoral candidate, I met Patrick at one of the town hall conference, and I was very impressed with his book on the on-grade public transit system. It's a light rail, and the cost. The cost would be the same as building this 8-kilometer subway on Broadway. And I was in Europe, and then I also was in China, and then I saw how efficient that light rail can be. And also it's very economical to build. And everybody probably remember my housing policy, the vacant property tax, and also the speculation tax. Although I didn't get elected, but my housing policy resonated with the Vancouver residents. So when I got into a discussion with Patrick, I learned that his housing policy is even more radical and amazing, and that's why I'm standing here, because I'm amazed with his policies and what he can do for people of Vancouver. So here I present you the next Vancouver mayor.
Woo! Yeah. Woo! Woo! That's it.
Thank you, Mina. Thank you very much. Your support means a lot to me, Mina. Thank you. There's a very important reason to recognize that we're on unceded territorial land of nations that have lived here for more than 10,000 years. And we are really Johnny-come-latelys. But the thrust of my campaign is around the question of land and who is that land for. We chose this site here because to my left there's a co-op housing which has been affordable since the 1970s. We used to do a lot of this kind of housing supported by the federal government, the provincial government, and the local government. We don't do that anymore. Instead, we build unaffordable condo construction, high-rises throughout the city, only affordable to the very wealthy and marketed, not here, but in Shanghai and places far afield for the investor class. 50% of our people who earn their living here now cannot afford either the rent or the mortgage on the most inexpensive housing in the city. This is particularly true for our millennial generation, our own children often between the ages of 20 and 35 or 40, who know for sure that they can't have a family in this city anymore, the city that they grew up in. They'll have to leave. They'll be exiled because they don't have the cash or the entry fee. So I have a couple of things to say. I have a couple things to say here. And one is to read a short 2-minute commentary, and then to give you a list of specific proposals, and then finally to see if there's any questions by people who are here or members of the press. So I want to say yet again that we are on unceded territory of those who came to this land 10 millennia before us. I have to repeat this because I want to talk about land and how land gets unfairly taken. We who have arrived much more recently also feel the heartbreak of losing the land under our feet. I want to run for mayor because this city faces an existential crisis, and too few others are proposing real solutions. Crisis is in housing, or more specifically, in the cost of land. It's not the buildings that cost a lot, it's the land under them. Waves of global cash are crashing over our city, washing us, or more precisely, washing our children off the land. I want to run for mayor because the policies of the current administration have made our problems much worse. Virtually erecting a for sale sign on our city. Developer-friendly policies and developer-friendly political parties are making our problems much worse. Developer-friendly policies and an absolute faith in the market to fix our problems have made them worse. Support for hyper-expensive infrastructure projects have made them worse. And most painfully for me, even the Greenest City program, by unintentionally attracting even more global investment, has made it worse. I want to run for mayor because our current administration's recent admissions of failure and weak attempts to reverse course have been as effective as a row of beanbags holding back a tsunami. I want to run for mayor because I want us to draft a clear and binding plan for the city we want, a plan that gives a place on this land, not just for the fortunate few, but for all of our children. I want to run for mayor because my 40+ years of working with communities has given me a faith that people working together can fix this problem and others. The Vision regime, with their distrust of people and dismissing those who oppose them as hacks, and other parties as the party of angry old men, divides us. I want respect for all people. I want to unite us. Here that are specific proposals. They won't be easy to achieve, but they are achievable. I don't want to do what is practical. I want to do what's necessary. I want to set a goal of 50% non-market housing, much like this. That doesn't mean subsidy housing. These people pay rent. It's just that their mortgages and rents are protected from the market forevermore. I want, of course, to fund this effort by aggressively seeking provincial and federal funds now available for non-market housing, and where better for those funds to land than in what is by some measures the most expensive city in the world to live in when costs of housing are compared to average salaries. I want to fight to make city property tax laws progressive to help fund this non-market housing. I want to revise the formula for development cost levy, the so-called DCL, and the community amenity contributions to CIC, which are taxes on development, to provide additional city funds for non-market housing, and also to reduce the speculative pressures on development land. All the profits that go from rezoning go to the land speculators and the landowners. We can't blame the developers for all these rising costs, because they only pay these exorbitant prices for the land, and the price of the condominiums is a consequence of that cost of land. In addition, we can shift expenditures in the city budget towards support for non-market housing. We have a lot of needs in the city, but housing is the first and foremost of them now. It's a crisis. It's not a problem, it's a crisis. Shift expenditures in city budgets towards support for that. Certainly, we want to use existing city land for that purpose right away, stop selling city land, but also purchase new land for non-market housing. Next, we need to integrate non-market housing into all neighborhoods at the missing middle scale. Here's a good example. This is an income mixed community with co-op housing to my left and condominium ownership to my right. Many of these units are deeply subsidized, so that a percentage of the people who live here qualify as very poor. And it's one of the most beautiful places in the city, without doubt. We want to engage every neighborhood and all stakeholders to produce a Vancouver citywide plan. Vancouver, believe it or not, ladies and gentlemen, is the only city in the region with no plan. Every other city has a citywide plan that they are forced to update every 5 years. Of course, Vancouver is exempt from that, being a charter city. So we do have the choice to have a plan. What could be more obvious as a need? The angst felt by our citizens in other neighborhoods, consequent to the constant threat of rezoning and spot zoning, is a consequence of not having a plan. If there is a binding plan, citizens will know exactly what's coming and will have participated in the creation of that plan. Finally, something needs to be done right away for our renters. We need to end dem-evictions and rent-evictions, certainly by returning 1980 prohibitions on the same, previously in the Residential Tenancy Act, but extracted in the 1990s. We need to put those protections back in against rent evictions, den evictions, and rent increases. So I thank you for your attention. I thank my supporters who are here holding these beautiful little signs. That's great. Thank you for being here. And I wonder if any members of the press or anyone else has a question.
The rent in the co-op building that's over here, what kind of rent are we talking? We're defining it as affordable. Do you know what these people are paying?
Typically, the standard is 30% of your income, so it can vary up and down based on your income.
Okay, so that's to suggest this.
That's generally the rule.
It's tied to, it is 30%.
Right.
Okay. I mean, the center left is kind of crowded as it relates to the mayoral race. What separates you from Kennedy, from Ian, from Shauna?
Yeah, well, I think some people use the progressive terms without really deserving it. If people are calling themselves progressives like the Vision Party continues to do, and still adheres to support for developers and the marketplace for providing housing, when that has been shown to be a clear failure, I think there's justification for challenging that label. My campaign is proudly left in the Bernie Sanders mold of the left. And when the market fails, I'm very much in favor of having the people come together and do something about it. Housing is a critical need. A roof over your head, if you can't get a roof over your head in the city, what is government for?
Right on.
Yeah. We got a Bernie Sanders for Vancouver.
Patrick, with your ambitious targets of 50% on-market housing, do you have any estimate of how much time that would take in your plan, given that we don't have quite as much federal funding as a place like Vienna?
We have to start obviously Monday, and getting finished by Tuesday is probably not going to happen. In Vienna, it took a couple of decades for them at the end of World War I to, in effect, solve this problem for their people. So I think that's a good benchmark. It would be great to exceed that. Certainly, all the new housing that is permitted in the city could meet this benchmark right away. So rather than a target of 8% or 10% or 20%, which is the maximum they've ever even attempted to get affordable housing, immediately go to 50%. And that's an achievable goal for all the new housing in our city, certainly. But it's important to emphasize, particularly for the over 50% of our citizens who are renters, that something needs to be done for them right away. So that rent needs to be stabilized, rent evictions and dem evictions need to be eliminated soon. We obviously need the provincial help on the Residential Tenancy Act for that to be achieved, but certainly they're working on it right now, and there's some hope that with our help and the strong support of the city, that will be sooner versus later. Okay. No other questions? Then I want to thank you all for coming out, and thank one of the residents nearby who's explained to me the problem of this lease, and want to promise that I may not solve all problems. Politicians never solve all problems, but I've spent 40 years in dialogue with citizens, working in stakeholder groups at roundtables, and that's the best way to proceed. So this problem that you're referring to, and others in individual neighborhoods, I have confidence in citizens to come together and collectively solve very difficult problems. So I thank you and others for being here.
We'd like to hear,
I don't have it.
well, we'd like to hear what you're going to do with the lease issue here. And it is a wonderful place to live. We live in the owned condos, but we are not rich people. And I'd like everybody to know that this government raised our lease